Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Dheeret Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 15, Instructions for Civilized Human Beings. Text number 20 onwards. So Narad Muni is further speaking to Yudhishthira Maharaj. Kamasyantam hi shrutridbhyam krodhasya tat falodayat jano yati na lobhasya jitva bhuktva disho bhuvaha. The strong bodily desires and needs of a person disturbed by hunger and thirst are certainly satisfied when he eats. Similarly, if one becomes very angry, that anger is satisfied by chastisement and its reaction. But as for greed, even if a greedy person has conquered all the directions of the world or has enjoyed everything in the world, still he will not be satisfied. So that's a situation of a greedy person. The rest of the senses can be satisfied, but not the senses of a greedy person, because his mind is not in control. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that lust, anger, and greed are the causes of the conditioned soul's bondage in this material world. Kama esha krodha esha rajoguna samadbhava. When strong lusty desires for sense gratification are unfulfilled, one becomes angry. This anger can be satisfied when one chastises his enemy. But when there is an increase in lobha or greed, which is the greatest enemy caused by Rajogun, the mode of passion, how can one advance in Krishna consciousness? So this is the most difficult thing to learn. Although greed can be used in service of Krishna, if one is very greedy to enhance his Krishna consciousness, this is a great boon. Tatra lolyam ekalam moolam. This is the best path available. That means Rupa Goswami has given this mantra that Tatra lolyam ekalam moolam means to purchase Krishna. There's only one mool or one price one has to pay. One has to be greedy to get Krishna. That greed is okay. But if we do get greedy in material world. If I have 10,000 rupees, then my next thing will be, oh, I should have 1 lakh rupees. If I have 1 lakh, then the next target would be, oh, I should have 10 lakh rupees. If I get 10 lakh, then I will not stop there. It will be, I should have 1 crore. Why shouldn't I have 1 crore? So it just goes on and on and on and on. And our needs also keep on increasing. More and more we accumulate, more our needs become stronger and stronger. Pandita Bhavo Rajan Bahugya Sanshaya Chida Sadasaspatyo Api Eke Asantoshat Patanti Adha. O King Yudhishthir, many persons with varied experience, many legal advisors, many learned scholars, and many persons eligible to become presidents of learned assemblies fall down into hellish life because of not being satisfied with their positions. For spiritual advancement, one should be materially satisfied. For if one is not materially satisfied, his greed for material development will result in the frustration of spiritual advancement. There are 2 things that nullify all good qualities. One is poverty, daridra doshana guna rashi nashi. If one is poverty stricken, all his good qualities become null and void. That is true, actually. If even if somebody has lots of good qualities, but if he is poor, nobody will even bother to listen to him or talk to him or even associate with him. It takes only a spiritually elevated person to see the good qualities of a materially impoverished person. It takes lots of qualifications to see, to understand those good qualities. But otherwise, in general sense, if somebody is poor, it doesn't matter how nice that person is, how humble. Oh, he is supposed to be humble. He is supposed to be tolerant because he's poor. That's the general rule is. And later Prabhupada says, similarly, if one becomes too greedy, his good qualifications are lost. Therefore, the adjustment is that one should not be poverty-stricken, but one must try to be fully satisfied with the bare necessities of life and not be greedy. So if one becomes too greedy, his good qualifications are lost, because then he just loses his good sense. He doesn't have any then. But generally, these kind of people are glorified in the material world. If one becomes too greedy, then they don't call him greedy. They say, "Oh, he's an achiever. He just doesn't sit still, and he wants to achieve or attain more and more." But basically, it's greed. There's nothing else. For a devotee to be satisfied with the bare necessities is therefore the best advice for spiritual advancement. Learned authorities in devotional life consequently advise that one not endeavor to increase the number of temples and mattas. Such activities can be undertaken only by devotees experienced in propagating the Krishna consciousness movement. All the acharyas in South India, especially Sri Ramanujacharya, constructed many big temples. In North India, all the Goswamis of Vrindavan constructed large temples. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur also constructed large centers known as Gaudiya Mathas. Therefore, temple construction is not bad, provided proper care is taken for the propagation of Krishna consciousness. Even if such endeavors are considered greedy, the greed is to satisfy Krishna, and therefore these are spiritual activities. So if one can, like Prabhupada did, so these temples, the real purpose of these temples, as he has explained earlier, is spiritual advancement, not the material advancement of the workers or the devotees who are living there, not for that. And if one can make sure that the visitors, the devotees, and the workers, or whoever is associated with that temple is making spiritual progress, then the opening of the temple is worth it. But even Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he opened this beautiful temple in Calcutta, in Bagh Bazaar, there were fights among his disciples that who will take what room, and I'll take this room, and I'll take that room. And they were, because so much of marble was installed in those rooms. Somebody donated lots of money, even at that time in 1930s. So Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was disgusted with that. He said, I would rather take away all these marble, sell them, and print books. Because the devotees are supposed to live simply. And this also happens. So asankalpa jet kamam krodham kama vivarjanat arthanarthekshya alobham bhayam tattvamarshana. By making plans with determination, one should give up lusty desires for sense gratification. Similarly, by giving up envy, one should conquer anger. By discussing the disadvantages of accumulating wealth, one should give up greed. And by discussing the truth, one should give up fear. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has suggested how one can conquer lusty desires for sense gratification. One cannot give up thinking of women, for thinking in this way is natural. Even while walking on the street, one will see so many women. However, if one is determined not to live with women, even while seeing a woman, he will not become lusty. If one is determined not to have sex, he can automatically conquer lusty desires. The example given in this regard is that even if one is hungry, if on a particular day he is determined to observe fasting, he can naturally conquer the disturbances of hunger and thirst. So just like Janmashtami is coming, so on Janmashtami we try to fast until midnight. So many times it is like, oh, I have to fast until midnight. I have to fast until midnight. But when Janmashtami day comes, and if we are determined, then Krishna gives us the energy to fast until midnight. If we are engaged in services, and then if we are determined, we can really do it. So this determination that I'm not going to indulge in these activities, one can do that. Test will be there. Testing will be there, but one should be determined. If one is determined not to be envious of anyone, he can naturally conquer anger. So enviousness leads to anger because I get envious and I get angry of somebody who is having better qualities or better possessions than I do, then I get angry. Similarly, one can give up the desire to accumulate wealth simply by considering how difficult it is to protect the money in one's possession. If one keeps a large amount of cash with him, he is always anxious about keeping it properly. Thus, if one discusses the disadvantages of accumulating wealth, he can naturally give up business without difficulty. But this is, again, this is very, very difficult to give up because we all need money. But when that need becomes greed, we don't know. It's hard to find that out. It's hard to discriminate or draw a line. When is that need becoming greed? Anvikshikya shokamoho dambham mahadupasaya yogantarayan maunena insam kamadya nihaya. By discussing spiritual knowledge, one can conquer lamentation and delusion. By serving a great devotee, one can become prideless. By keeping silent, one can avoid obstacles on the path of mystic yoga. And simply by stopping sense gratification, one can conquer envy. Again, envy. It's say all these Kam, Krodh, Lobho, Mad, Matsarya, they are different anarthas, and they have to be conquered. They have to be. And in different ways, Narad Muni is telling. If one's son has died, one may certainly be affected by lamentation and illusion and cry for the dead son. But one may overcome lamentation and illusion by considering the verses of Bhagavad Gita, which by discussing spiritual knowledge. Like in Gita, it is said, Jatasi dhruvam mrityur dhruvam janma mritasya cha. As a soul transmigrates, one who has taken birth must give up the present body, and then he must certainly accept another body. There should be no cause for lamentation. Therefore, Lord Krishna says, Dhiras tatra na muyati. If one who is a dhira or sober, who is learned in philosophy and established in knowledge, cannot be unhappy over the transmigration of the soul. But it's very difficult to give up lamentation and illusion. Until one is trained in this spiritual knowledge, it's very difficult. And by serving a great devotee, one becomes prideless. If we want to be humble, we have to start serving. We have to serve devotees. By keeping silent, one can avoid obstacles on the path of mystic yoga, and simply by stopping sense gratification. It's not that easy. Just stop the sense gratification. Senses are there to be gratified. But we just have to change the gratification from material to spiritual. And then there are chances we can conquer envy, but still our material conditioning is so strong. Even in the spiritual circles, they become envious. And then we become envious, we become angry, and then we commit offenses. Kripya bhutajam dukkham devam jayat samadhina atmajam yoga viryena nidram sattva nishevaya. By good behavior and freedom from envy, one should counteract sufferings due to other living entities. By meditation in trance, one should counteract sufferings due to providence. And by practicing Hatha Yoga, Pranayama, and so forth, one should counteract sufferings due to the body and mind. Similarly, by developing the mode of goodness, especially in regard to eating, one should conquer sleep. By practice, one should avoid eating in such a way that other living entities will be disturbed and suffer. Since I suffer when I'm pinched or killed by others, or when I get pinched or killed by others, I should not attempt to pinch or kill any other living entity. People do not know that because of killing innocent animals, they themselves will have to suffer severe reactions from material nature. Any country where people indulge in unnecessary killing of animals will have to suffer from wars and pestilence imposed by material nature. Comparing one's own suffering to the suffering of others, therefore one should be kind to all living entities. One cannot avoid the sufferings inflicted by providence, and therefore when suffering comes, one should fully absorb oneself in chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. One can avoid sufferings from the body and mind by practicing mystic Hatha Yoga. So we know how it feels when somebody pinches me, or somebody pokes maybe a knife or a scissor in me, or if somebody tries to burn me. It hurts. So how much that animal would be suffering if I cut his throat and kill him just to eat his flesh. So Prabhupada said, because of killing innocent animals, they themselves will have to suffer severe reactions from material nature. So now the suffering would be both ways. One, Prabhupada is saying that any country where unnecessary killing of animals is going on, they will have to suffer from wars and pestilence imposed by material nature. At the same time, there will be suffering. Like if I kill an animal and eat his flesh, obviously no animal or nobody loves to die or get killed. If that's why there is this nice saying. I don't remember who said that. He said, if the slaughterhouses have glass walls, no, everybody will become vegetarian, because then they'll see how the animals are suffering. And people have taken footage of animals, how they get slaughtered. First, how they are kept, and then how they get slaughtered, and how they're suffering. How much they try to run away from getting killed, but still, these demons that just capture them and kill them, and then skin them. And sometimes skinning goes on when the animal is still alive. Just a little pin prick on our hand, maybe when we were getting the vaccination, it did hurt. But what about the animal who's getting killed? So what point I was getting at is, so that consciousness of suffering, of fear, of anguish, and maybe of revenge also, it goes into that flesh. The flesh is not just dead piece of meat with some protein. No, the consciousness goes in that. Now that flesh is taken, sold in the market. Of course, that person cannot be in the mode of goodness. And then it is cooked by people who are again with demonic tendencies. And when the person eats that food, what is going to happen to his consciousness? We forget about the reactions that they will get from material nature. Even before that, so much of negative emotions, negative feelings, not just negative, horrible feelings have gone in that food. And if I eat that, what will happen to my consciousness? That is why it is said, you are what you eat. So if I become, or if I continue to eat that food, my consciousness will be in the mode of ignorance and passion only. Mostly ignorance, actually. So with that consciousness, I lead my life. How would I be dealing with others? How would I taking care of my business? And then at the time of death, first of all, I have to pay for all these reactions, sinful reactions, and then my consciousness is of that level. Good luck coming back to human form of life. And that too, when Krishna has provided tons and tons of fruits and vegetables, and so many grains are there, milk is there, we can live happily off of that. It's all in the mode of goodness. And that's what the shloka says, by developing the mode of goodness, especially in regard to eating, one should conquer sleep. And when one conquers sleep, means then he can engage himself in the time that he has saved in spiritual practices. So spiritual practices, they don't just come that easily. We have to work on it. Of course, for the beginners, we just say, don't worry, eat whatever you're doing, just chant. But that is because Harinam is so powerful that slowly that person himself will give up eating all sorts of nonsense. But to make progress, one has to be at least in the mode of goodness, if not beyond. So that is why eating and sleeping and everything, every activity has to be in goodness. Rajas tamascha sattvena sattvam chopashmena cha etat sarvam guru bhaktya purusho hyanjasa jayet. One must conquer the modes of passion and ignorance by developing the mode of goodness. And then one must become detached from the mode of goodness by promoting oneself to the platform of Shuddha Sattva. All this can be automatically done if one engages in the service of the spiritual master with faith and devotion. In this way, one can conquer the influence of the modes of nature. So that's what Prabhupada is saying, or Narad Muni is saying. Well, first come to the mode of goodness and then go beyond that. Just by treating the root cause of an ailment, one can conquer all bodily pains and sufferings. Similarly, one is devoted and faithful to the spiritual master, he can conquer the influence of Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamagun very easily. Yogis and Jnanis practice in many ways to conquer the senses, but the Bhakta immediately attains the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the mercy of the spiritual master. Yasya prasadat bhagavad prasado. If the spiritual master is favorably inclined, one naturally receives the mercy of the Supreme Lord. And by the mercy of the Supreme Lord, one immediately becomes transcendental, conquering all the influences of Sattvagun, Rajagun, Tamagun within this material world. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Sa gunan samtitiyata brahma bhuyaya kalpate. If one is a pure devotee acting under the directions of the Guru, one easily gets the mercy of the Supreme Lord and thus becomes immediately situated on the transcendental platform. This is explained in the next verse. So this, yesterday, Moshe Mataji asked this point of the mercy of Guru and Krishna, but here Prabhupada is clearly saying, if one is a pure devotee acting under the directions of the Guru, so acting under the directions means following the instructions and performing his services or spiritual practices, one easily gets the mercy of the Supreme Lord and thus becomes immediately situated on the transcendental platform. So that work we have to do. Vedi sadhana bhakti, that's what it's called, sadhana bhakti. We have to do the sadhana. Yasya sakshat bhagavati jnana deepa praday guru martya saddhi shrutam tasya sarvam kunjara shochvat. The spiritual master should be considered to be directly the Supreme Lord because he gives transcendental knowledge for enlightenment. Consequently, for one who maintains the material conception that the spiritual master is an ordinary human being, everything is frustrated. His enlightenment and his Vedic studies and knowledge are like the bathing of an elephant. So this example we had read earlier also, Kundar Shochvat. When Parikshit Maharaj asked questions to Shukdev Goswami about Prayashchita, and Shukdev Goswami was testing Parikshit Maharaj. That, okay, do some Prayashchit, and that's okay, that's enough. But Parikshit Maharaj, it is like Kunjar Shochvat, means Prayashchita done by like tapasya or any other activity is like bathing of an elephant. And as soon as he comes out of the water, he again rolls into the dust. He gets dirty again. Because the propensity to commit sin is not gone. And that's when Shukdev Goswami said, yes, you have understood. So bhakti is the process, actually. So here it is, use this example in a different way. Let's see. It is recommended that one honor the spiritual master as being on an equal status with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sakshat Dharitvena. This is enjoined in every scripture. Acharyam mam vijaniyat. One should consider the Acharya to be as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In spite of all these instructions, if one considers the spiritual master an ordinary human being, one is doomed. His study of the Vedas and his austerities and penances for enlightenment are all useless, like the bathing of an elephant. An elephant bathes in a lake quite thoroughly, but as soon as it comes on the shore, it takes some dust from the ground and strews it over his body. Thus, there is no meaning to the elephant's bath. One may argue by saying that since the spiritual master's relatives and the men of his neighborhood consider him an ordinary human being, what is the fault on the part of the disciple who considers the spiritual master an ordinary human being? This will be answered in the next verse. But the injunction is that spiritual master should never be considered an ordinary human being. One should strictly adhere to the instructions of the spiritual master. For if he is pleased, certainly the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased. Yasya prasada, Bhagavad prasad. So study Vedas, studies, austerities, penances, charities, everything is of no use if one does not honor his spiritual master. It's like bathing of an elephant. So as soon as he comes out, the elephant is going to throw dust over his body and become dirty again. So how is the spiritual master pleased? If we sincerely attempt to follow the instructions. Like Prabhupada said, just chant minimum 16 rounds, follow the principles, read my books, preach, and some of the few more activities that he has given, and that's it. If we just try to become Krishna conscious and try to make progress sincerely, Prabhupada is very pleased, very, very pleased. That's all he wants. Esho hai Bhagavan Sakshat Pradhan Purusheshwaraha Yogeshwara Vimirgyankrir Loko Yam Manyate Naram. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, is the master of all of the living entities and of the material nature. His lotus feet are sought and worshipped by great saintly persons like Vyas. Nonetheless, there are fools who consider Lord Krishna an ordinary human being. The example of Lord Krishna being the Supreme Personality of Godhead is appropriate in regard to understanding the spiritual master. The spiritual master is called Sevak Bhagavan, the servitor personality of God, and in Krishna is called Sevya Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is to be worshipped. The spiritual master is a worshipper God, where the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is a worshipable God. This is the difference between the spiritual master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So how the spiritual master to be respected or treated? He is a Sevak Bhagavan. He is not a Savior. Savior means one who is worshipped, one who is served. Spiritual master is one who is serving, but he should be considered as good as God. Another point, Bhagavad Gita, which constitutes the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is presented by the spiritual master as it is without deviation. Therefore, the absolute truth is present in the spiritual master. As clearly stated in text 28, Jnana Deepa Prade. The Supreme Personality of Godhead gives real knowledge to the entire world. And the spiritual master, as a representative of the Supreme Godhead, carries the message throughout the world. Therefore, on the absolute platform, there is no difference between the spiritual master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If someone considers the Supreme Personality, Krishna or Lord Ramchandra, to be an ordinary human being, this does not mean that the Lord becomes an ordinary human being. Similarly, if the family members of the spiritual master, who is a bona fide representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, consider the spiritual master an ordinary human being, this does not mean that he becomes an ordinary human being. The spiritual master is as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, one who is very serious about spiritual advancement must regard the spiritual master in this way. Even a slight deviation from this understanding can create disaster in the disciples' Vedic studies and austerities. So, spiritual master, like now, Srila Prabhupada, his wife and his children or his sister, they would not treat him as a Jagat Guru or the spiritual master or a big scholar, Bhakti Vedanta, scholar with Bhakti Vedanta title. Their relationship with him is different. But that doesn't mean that we start treating Prabhupada in that manner. So just like Krishna or Lord Ram, and like Yashoda Maya treating Krishna in a different way, but that doesn't mean he's not God. He's still the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when we also treat him as Supreme Personality of Godhead, we make progress. Because we are still in the so much of beginning stages of our bhakti. Shad Varga Sanyam Ekantah Sarva Niyama Chotana Tadanta Yadino Yogana Vaheyu Shrama Vaha. Ritualistic ceremonies, regulative principles, austerities, and the practice of yoga are all meant to control the senses and mind. But even after one is able to control the senses and mind, if he doesn't come to the point of meditation upon the Supreme Lord, all such activities are simply labor in frustration. So all these activities or any activity has to take us to the point where we meditate on the Lord or where we can engage in the service of the Lord. One may argue that one may achieve the ultimate goal of life, realization of the super soul, by practicing the yoga system and ritualistic performances according to the Vedic principles, even without staunch devotion to the spiritual master. The actual fact, however, is that by practicing yoga, one must come to the platform of meditating upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in the scriptures, dhyana avastita tadagatena. A person in meditation achieves the perfection of yoga practice when he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By various practices, one may come to the point of controlling the senses. But simply controlling the senses does not bring one to a substantial conclusion. However, by staunch faith in the spiritual master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one not only controls the senses, but also realizes the Supreme Lord. Yasya deve para bhakteritha deve tatha guru. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master are all the imports of the Vedic knowledge automatically revealed. It is further stated, Tushesham Sarva Bhutatma. Simply by rendering service to the spiritual master, one crosses the ocean of nescience and returns home back to Godhead. Thus he gradually sees the Supreme Lord face to face and enjoys life in association with the Lord. The ultimate goal of yoga is to come in contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unless this point is achieved, one's so-called yoga practice is simply labor without any benefit, or simply a useless wastage of labor and time. So the point is, anything that we do, ritualistic ceremonies, means karma kanda, or regulative principles, tapa, dan, yajna, whatever we do, if they don't take us to the point of bhakti, then it is a useless wastage of labor, time, everything. That's why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Yad karoshi yad ashnashi yad juhoshi tadashi. Whatever you do, whatever you give away, whatever austerities you perform, charities you do, or whatever you do, just do it as an offering to me. Because that is a perfection of everything, perfection of yoga, perfection of tapa, dan, everything. Perfection is when it is done for Krishna. Yatha varta dayo hiyartha yogasyartham na bibrati anarthaya bhaveyu sma purtam ishtam tatha sataha. As professional activities or business profits cannot help one in spiritual advancement, but are a source of material entanglement, the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies cannot help anyone who is not a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one becomes very rich through his professional activities, through trade or through agriculture, this does not mean that he is spiritually advanced. To be spiritually advanced is different from being materially rich. Although the purpose of life is to become spiritually rich, unfortunate men, misguided as they are always engaged in trying to become materially rich. Such material engagements, however, do not help one in the actual fulfillment of the human mission. On the contrary, material engagements lead one to be attracted to many unnecessary necessities, which are accompanied by the risk that one may be born in a degraded condition. So material engagements lead one to be attracted to many unnecessary necessities. And definitely one biggest disadvantage of being very, very much materially rich is one becomes proud. One doesn't respect the spiritual people or anybody. One tries to manipulate people, devotees. And then suddenly one commits offenses. There's nothing wrong with being materially rich. It's being attached to those possessions and using that energy of the Lord in our service or to manipulate people. That is where we commit mistakes. And it happens. Unless until one is spiritually very, very strong, one can commit these mistakes. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Urdhvam Gachanti Sattvasto. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. Especially in this Kali Yuga, material advancement means degradation and attraction to many unwanted necessities that create a low mentality. Therefore, Jaganya Guna Vrittistha, since people are contaminated by the lower qualities, they will lead their next lives either as animals or in other degraded forms of life. Making a show of religion without Krishna consciousness may make one popular in the estimation of unintelligent men. But factually, such a materialistic display of spiritual advancement does not help one at all. It will not prevent one from missing the goal of life. So it's just the people like to make a show of religion, show of that I'm so religious, I'm so spiritual. Like once one rich businessman came from Calcutta to meet Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, where he was staying. And Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj would stay in a very simple hut, and sometimes he would just he would chant in a toilet so the people don't disturb him. So this person came, wealthy, rich businessman, and he was walking like as if he was in ecstasy. He was crying, and he was holding on to other people so that he doesn't fall down. And one of his servants came forward and he asked, Babaji Maharaj, please give him your blessings. He's in the ecstatic mood of bhakti. And Babaji Maharaj looked at him and he said, he wants my blessings? Yes, Maharaj, he wants your blessings. Okay, my blessings, sir. He should leave everything and come stay with me and chant here. Give up everything, give up all his business. And that businessman, when he heard what Babaji Maharaj was saying, he just got up and ran away. So it's just a show of religion. And who are we trying to fool actually? Who is it? Krishna is sitting as Paramatma in our heart. He knows all our thoughts. Forget about activity. He knows all our thoughts. You cannot fool him. We might be able to fool few people or maybe lots of people we can fool, but not Krishna. So making a show of religion is just doesn't help anybody. But this is Kali Yuga. People just like to show off. They want to get cheap adoration, publicity, and everybody else praising them. Oh, he is such a pure devotee. She is such a pure devotee. We don't even know the meaning of a pure devotee yet. We're not at that level. Not even close. We are so much in the beginning stages. There's no question of being a pure devotee right now. It will take time. We just have to stick to our very sadhana bhakti properly. We can't even chant properly. Forget about being a pure devotee. But just makes one feel good. So they just like to show off. But anyway, it doesn't help anybody. As Prabhupada said, it will not prevent one from missing the goal of life. So all we have to do is introspect, go inside ourselves, introspect, see where am I and what I am doing and what I'm doing wrong, and move on and chant and try to fix those things, fix those issues, and get more and more involved in chanting. So I guess we can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments? Okay, so we'll stop here. You all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri